Hey, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host. Today I have a special guest, Mr. Mark Webb. He is known as the Aroma Science Guy, and we're going to discuss how he uses his knowledge on aromas and his aroma therapy and science and using it with sous vide. I'll be right back with Mr. Mark Webb, the Aroma Science Guy.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Hey, all, I want to welcome back Inkbird Products as a sponsor of the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Inkbird makes many great different temperature controllers, thermometers, all kinds of time and temp controllers. But one of the best things that they make is their new sous vide circulator that includes Wi-Fi, 1,000 watts of power, and super quiet at a really affordable price. It's one of my top picks for a budget sous vide circulator for people who are just getting started. Make sure you check it out in the link below. Check out Inkbird. Welcome back, Inkbird Products, to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today I got another great guest, Mr. Mark Webb. He is known as the Aroma Science Guy, and he is going to be a speaker at the 2020 Sous Vide Summit that's going to be online this year because of the nastiness that's going on. It's going to be virtual, but you'll be able to actually participate in this online if you want to. I'm going to have information on how you can get tickets at the end of the podcast and also in the description. But Mark, welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell me where you are, who you are, and what you do.
G'day, Darren. G'day, people. I'm Mark Webb. I'm called the Aroma Science Guy because of back in 2015, I was over there in the States doing some classes, and one of the people said, "Oh, you're like Bill Nye, the science guy." And I said, no, I'm Mark Webb, the Aroma Science Guy. So it was a bit of a joke at the time in this class. And then I thought about it. I thought, well, actually I am the Aroma Science Guy. My background is in biomedical research and working with aromatic plants. It's a bit of a convoluted life story, which I'll compress into about 2 seconds for you. Went to university, wanted to be a chemist, found that there wasn't a hell of a lot of work in that industry, got into computers, went into the IT world, worked in that in corporate newspapers for like nearly a decade. Then I branched out into desktop publishing and graphic arts, made redundant from the corporate world, as happened back in those days. The raiders came in and off went the company and they started cutting people. So I set up my own business doing graphics design and pre-press and all that sort of stuff. And while I was doing that, I kind of went back to my plant roots. So I've got a degree in biochemistry and plant physiology and that sort of genetics and that sort of thing. So I came back and I started to study aromatherapy. In the corporate world, I got into I had a lot of stress, and I got into the massage and using essential oils like aromatherapy, the soft end of that industry. But because of my science and plant love, I sort of started looking at it a bit more seriously. And then I ended up writing a book called Bush Sense. Back in early 2000, I released it. And that's about Australian plants uniquely and their aromatics. And then from there, the world kind of changed for me. I got asked to teach a class. That class turned into a career for 6 years, teaching all sorts of stuff at one of the colleges here in Sydney when I was living there. And then I had a request to come to Queensland to work for a biomedical research company, working with essential oils and getting into the medical end of this. That then branched out into cosmetic chemistry and formulations chemistry. And so today, that's what I do. I do product formulations in the food, beverage, cosmetics, personal care industries. I also teach. I travel the world, giving people advice about aromatic crops, about aromatic chemistry, about formulation, about safety. And so I've ended up doing things I love. I get to travel, I get to meet people, I get to take lots of photos of beautiful things, including food. And so I've combined in this presentation and also at the Sous Vide conference two of my passions. I love to cook. I'm a food geek. My kitchen looks like Heston Blumenthal's research lab. I've got about 6 sous vides, I've got vacuum ovens, I've got all sorts of gear, rotovap, everything else. And for me, it was like bringing two of my passions together, aromatics and sous vide cooking. And that's where I'm at now.
So aromatics, when people hear that, and I know, people like me, of course, who have not really studied it or looked into it, they think of aromatherapy, like you said, or incense, smells. But
Yep.
you kind of incorporate it also into foods and flavorings and seasonings. So how does it all work?
Well, we've only got 6 basic tastes. Everything else is smell. So all of the subtle flavors that we get from food come from smell. That's why when you have a head cold or you're really congested, you can't taste anything really. All you taste is salty, sweet, umami, oily, those type of tastes, bitter. But all of the subtleties of flavor come from aroma. And the aromatherapy sector is a very small wedge of the use of extracted aromatics on this planet. The majority of them go into foods and drinks, and in personal care products, cleaning products. So all the smells in all your laundry detergents and stuff, they're all extracted aromatics, sometimes synthesized. All your flavors in all your dishes are all extracted aromatics. Either, sometimes they use fresh herbs and spices, but a lot of the time they use concentrates, oleoresins and the like. So that's my background and speciality, is in that extraction technology. And one of the things that I've been working on the last decade is carbon dioxide extracted aromatics and their uses both in the medical field and in the culinary field. And I'll touch on that today. I've got a couple of examples of that I want to talk about, but that's what my sous vide presentation will be about at the conference. I'll be talking about aromatic cuisine sous vide style is the title of the presentation, and it's really about how do you take these extracted aromatics and combine them in sous vide, and why you might want to do it, why they leave dried herbs and spices for dead.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get at. I want people to understand that without your sense of smell, you shut off one of your main senses that affect the taste of your food. I mean, we do have, like you said, we have a sense of taste, but that's only a small part of how we actually process what the food actually tastes like. Because if we don't, like you said, you have a cold, you can't smell anything, your food tastes totally different. And it's not because it's messing up your taste buds at all. It's because that main part of how you process the flavors of what you're eating comes from your sense of smell
through the olfactory system. Yeah, and it's really important to understand that your sense of taste triggers one area in the brain. Your sense of touch triggers one area in your brain. Sense of hearing, one area in the brain. Sense of sight, one area in the brain. But the sense of smell, olfaction, triggers 5 areas in the brain. So we are, as a species, as an animal, we are very attuned to smell. We are in our animal brain, our limbic system, the ancient brain. It's about the defense mechanism. It's about, oh, that smells like rotten meat, or worse, dead carrion, like really, really bad carrion, or some of those smelly cheeses you get, those wash rind cheeses. Oh, yeah, they're a bit like Limburger and the like. They're oh so disgusting smelling, but they are an interesting taste once you get them in your mouth, if you don't puke in the meantime. But there's that. But we use our sense of smell for working out whether a mate is appropriate. We work it out. We use it for working out whether this food is off or not. It also triggers memory. So you can go back to foods that your grandmother used to cook for you when you were a child, and you revisit those dishes, and you're back there as a little kid eating that beautiful spiced apple pie at grandma's table. It's a very profound sense, and I've done a bit of work in that cognition side of it, and using aromatics to help people work through issues, but also calming, soothing, relaxing, focusing. So, you know, I love this shit. It's really, really fun. And it's, but in food, yeah, that's where I enjoy it even more.
Yeah. I 100% agree, because whenever I smell fresh bread baking, it takes me back to when I was a kid. My mom used to make fresh bread all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So when I smell it, I just, in my mind, it's like, man, that reminds me of being, you know, 6 years old, hanging out by the kitchen, waiting for that bread to come out, because I know it was going to be good, you know? So, but yeah, it does. I mean, your sense of smell affects you in so many more ways than people realize. And once you take it away, it's like I said, you get a sinus, infection or something where you can't smell. I mean, it really affects you much more than anything else would,
Yeah, well, yeah, it does. And for those people that have lost their sense of smell, either through chemical accident, whatever, their world is a lot smaller. They miss it. It's like, imagine being blind. Well, take being blind and take it to the umpteenth level of never being able to smell rain again, never being able to taste food other than those basic tastes. Like when you've got a head cold, but on steroids. So, it's a horrible thing to happen. And anyway.
And it can be dangerous too. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah. Well, very, very dangerous. People have ended up dead because they can't smell, or because they can't smell gas, or they can't smell, dangerous chemicals. Ammonia is a good one. It burns out the olfactory bulb badly. And people that have been working in refrigeration, if they get an ammonia leak, and if the ammonia gas doesn't kill them, often it will burn out their olfactory bulb, and they can't smell anything. And
wow.
They're pretty much impaired after that. That's not a particularly nice topic, mate. Let's move on to something more interesting, like more joyful, sunshine in this dark COVID times.
Well, let's talk about how you got interested in sous vide and started, working with, your aromatics and working them into the sous vide cooking method.
Sure. How about I share this screen and let's have
you can go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and share your
a quick walkthrough.
Sure.
So this slide here is a bit of an overview of who I am and what I do. So I do formulation work, and scientists traveled the world. I teach all over the place. In the last 2 years, I've been to America, Canada, Malaysia, Sumatra, Singapore, Hong Kong, Bali, New Zealand, and Australia. So, I travel around a fair bit. This year I had planned to be back in America again, but this little tiny virus got in the way of all those international travel plans. As I said, I teach classes everywhere in aromatic science. I teach the hard end of aromatherapy, aromatic medicine. So I teach the internal ingestion of essential oils for medical purposes, plus also food and beverages is another thing I like to do. How I got into it, when I was working in the biotech industry, this was my first sous vide. I ended up buying a lab circulator and retrofitting it to a tank, and it's a manual one, and I calibrated it. So I'd seen this thing about, I really wanted to cook kangaroo properly. I tried searing kangaroo in a pan. I just couldn't get it to cook properly. And, being a very lean meat, it was difficult. But we'll get onto that a bit later. But this is what started me in it. The thing that really hooked me on it was this particular dish. I got myself a primo barbecue. I'm going to do a sous vide pork loin on the bone. And up to this point, pork had always been difficult to cook properly. If you try and do a lean pork cut like pork loin in the oven, it always dries out, or most of the time dries out, unless you wrap it in bacon and wrap it in foil and whatever else. It's a lot of work. And I'd heard sous vide was the way to go, and so I did. I basically basted it in apple balsamic vinegar and chucked it in the sous vide and cooked it, and then decided to finish it in the barbecue. And I basted it with balsamic vinegar. I smoked it with apple wood. I layered those flavors. Well, this particular dish I cut with a butter knife. It was so tender. It was so delicious. And as I wrote there, carved like butter, the most juicy, tender, flavorful pork I've ever ever tasted, and I was hooked. And pretty much I have been since then. And so I expanded my gear. I ended up, and then organic turkey breast as well. Again, turkey often dries out when you oven roast it,
Sure.
but cooked in the sous vide, it is delicious and succulent.
Going back to that pork though for a second, you used apple cider vinegar.
Apple balsamic vinegar.
Yeah.
So,
but the vinegar should have also worked as a tenderizer as well.
Yes. Yeah. So the balsamic vinegars, because they're cooked down, they're concentrated. They've got a lot more sugar in them. You actually concentrate that sugar, and it helps with the Maillard reactions on the skin of the meat too. This is an old photo off one of my old phones, so it's not particularly color color balanced or anything. But yeah, the skin looked amazing, and it was extremely tender. It was delicious. And that's something I've used for salmon. I'll use red papaya, or I'll use for the enzymes in it, or I might use pineapple sometimes with really tough cuts of meat, or kiwi fruit.
Yeah, kiwi is another one.
Yeah, so you get that enzymatic breakdown of the protein. You start to break it down. A lot of the time, though, I don't tend to bother too much with that unless it's a really gristly piece of meat, because long cooks in sous vide will take care of that. You'll shift the collagen to gelatin.
I made a mistake once of using a high vinegar based marinade in the sous vide, and it kind of mushed it out. Yeah. Now they're okay if you're doing a shorter, time, but if you're doing a 36-hour cook, you don't want to have any kind of other helpers in there to tenderize it.
Nah, look, when I'm doing those long cooks for things like brisket or anything that's got a lot of collagen in it, like oyster blade steak or roasts that have got a lot of that gristle through the center, I tend to keep it very simple.
Yeah.
I don't tend to over marinate. What I prefer to do is salt and pepper, maybe a little bit of garlic salt, maybe some herbs and spices, but very minimal, and then put it in, do the sous vide, take it out, and particularly if I'm finishing in the pellet smoker, which is something I've been doing a lot of in the last year, 18 months. And it's at that time that I'll then glaze it with various sauces and whatnot, and finish it in the pellet smoker as part of that process, which I've got some slides to show you a bit later in this presentation. So so turkey was great. And then I got myself a Sous Vide Supreme, and I have to say that that unit is my standard thing I use in the kitchen every day. It's quiet. It sits there. It doesn't evaporate. I don't have to worry about cleaning a circulator or getting gummed up with muck. It doesn't burble. It doesn't carry on. It just sits there,
Yeah.
and that's what I like. Occasionally, if you don't load it properly, it'll sort of fluctuate on its temperature and it'll beep at you a bit more than it should when it's working. But it's a very stable workhorse. 11-litre tank, so it's a big enough tank for a family to cook. I did 20 packets of chicken breast in it one day, which that was a fair bit. If I'm doing big cooks, though, I'll use this 35-litre poly tank, either with this old lab circulator, which still works a dream, by the way. It's fantastic. It really is great. Since then, I've moved on. I've got a second Sous Vide Supreme, the Breville one. Not so happy with that compared to the original. The original, I think, was better made. A couple of friends, when they came out, they bought them and they ended up failing on them. And I think I've got another one that failed that I picked up from a friend that I've got to get in and fix. I think the PID controller's gone bad in it. The Optimum Sous Vide circulator is just a standard generic stick circulator. That's what I tend to use when I'm traveling. So if I do road trips or travel around the country, go visit friends and family, or for work, that's what I'll throw in the car with a poly tank, so that I've got something to cook with when I'm traveling. Bought a couple of others as well, and then about 18 months ago, I got myself a Poly Science chamber vac, which was I'd been lusting after a chamber vac for years since I started doing sous vide, and that really made a big difference. And then finally, I got the Poly Science MX circulator. I bought it secondhand from a chef, and I must admit, I haven't used it a great deal, but it's the Rolls Royce as far as I'm concerned of gear in this area. Now, maybe that's probably changed a bit recently with some of the other stick circulators that are around, but for professional gear, that is a very consistent piece of equipment. Very, very accurate. If I want really tight, accurate temperature to 0.1 of a degree Celsius, then I'll use the Poly Science.
Well, the Poly Science, they're like you said, they're a workhorse or a tank. You can't kill them. They're made for the commercial kitchen. So, I mean, but they still cost the money too. If they're not going to be good for somebody who, cooks sous vide once or twice a week or once or twice a month.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, because they're made to be, run nonstop or, and they don't have the fancy Wi-Fi apps and things like that some of these, the consumer stuff does. And, and the chefs don't want that anyway, because they know, you set it and you leave it go, and then you know what you're putting in it. The chefs will use it. That's my steak sous vide there, for medium rare. So they don't, keep adjusting it and monkeying with it. That's their medium rare steak sous vide, thing. And that's what it does. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and as you said, they're a workhorse. And so you might say, well, why have I got it? Because I could. I got it at a great price. I've been waiting for it, and picked it up on Facebook Marketplace from a chef who was moving out of it, and it turned up and it was dirty and grotty and full of fat and caked up with calcium scale, and it took me about a week to clean it. But hey, to get it for less than half price, yeah, I'll take that, because I know it's good. I know it'll be good for another 20 years, so I'm not worried about it. So
right.
But yeah, my standard cook is the Sous Vide Supreme, because it works for a small family. Like, I don't have kids with me anymore. It's just my partner and I, and it but I'll also do cooks where I might cook, 5 or 6 meals in a go, and then I won't use the sous vide for a couple of days, but it's on the bench at least 2, maybe 3 times a week. So that's how much sous vide cooking I do at home. It's a lot. If I'm doing, I've been working with a couple of local butchers, doing a bit of sous vide and barbecue for them, and as well, doing some testing and whatnot to get them excited about the prospect of using sous vide. And so that's when I'll crank the 2 tanks up, or go to the bigger tank when I'm doing large runs, when I've got the Jim Buoy, the big green mountain grill, and I'll load it up. It's fantastic. So so the other gear, Iwatani butane torch, because back in the day, the other ones were dangerous. If you turn a butane canister upside down and you don't have one of the good torches, you end up with a flamethrower, because the liquid butane will run out. And I did that once with a cheap torch and never again. So I sourced the Iwatani, and these days there's a lot of other ones. If I don't feel like firing up the smoker and I want something smoked, I've got the Breville, or you've also got Poly Science smoke gun. I use the polycarb vacuum containers for doing a lot of cold infusion work with beverages, which we're not going to talk about today. And then there are my 2 Barbies, the Primo ceramic charcoal and the Green Mountain Grill pellet grill. I have to say that since getting the pellet grill, my barbecuing has exploded, because it's just so easy. It's like,
it's convenient. It's very convenient.
It's the same as sous vide. It's you literally roll it out, uncover it, plug it in, fill the hopper, turn it on, connect the Wi-Fi app, set the base temperature, wait for it to smoke up, get it ready, throw your meat in, hit your program. I usually just set a timer and come back to it, and I'll have the internal probe, and I have a secondary set of probes running on it just to check if I'm running different things. And what I've noticed is I just go out to it less and less. I go out every hour or so when I'm basting. If I'm glazing stuff, I'm basting it or turn it, but most of the time I don't need to. I'll often use it for doing cold smoking with a couple of smoke tubes, like those stainless steel tubes you fill up with pellets. They're great. They're great for doing bacon, for doing cold smoked bacon. And it's easy, and I like that. It's one of the biggest things I love about doing sous vide and barbecue, the same as you. you don't have to sit there with a barbecue. You can put it on. You can do most of your cook with sous vide, and you finish it in the barbecue, or you pre-cook it in the barbecue. And I find that's a godsend. I've never been a one to sit up all night. You know, I don't drink beer anyway, but sitting up tending a barbecue for 18 or 20 hours to smoke, to do a brisket. Yeah, look, good on people who want to do that, but that's not my cup of tea. I'd rather be asleep.
Well, the people that usually say that, they only do one like once a month like that, because they're the ones that'll sit there and go, oh, I don't want to have to cook a pork butt and sit there and babysit it. They'll, you know, do something else. But, you know, I find it to where I like to cook, you know, standard barbecue every once in a while too, you know, just using the grill or the smoker, but I don't have to, you know, and I love experimenting with different ways of cooking and mixing them together. And one of the things that I really like, and I want to talk about this with you, is with sous vide. And this is what I'm going to talk about at the Sous Vide Summit, is when you combine these two methods, especially sous vide and barbecue, you know, you got the ultimate low and slow with sous vide and low and slow with fire and smoke. You can make something, if you combine them together, you can make something totally different than you can make with either one of them by themselves. And I've said this to Jason and Mike a lot, is that I could take a brisket and sous vide it at 135 degrees for 48 hours or what have you, take it out, put it in the smoker for 2 hours to get a nice spark and get it nice and smoky, and take it out. And I've got a medium rare, tender, smoky brisket that I can't make in a smoker. You know, I can make it medium rare in a smoker, but it won't be tender, you know.
No, it'll be tough as.
And I can make it medium rare in the sous vide, but it won't be smoky. But it's I can take those two methods and combine them. It's amazing, you know, and it's just something that you couldn't create with either one of those separate. So when people go, you know, people try to go, oh, well, what's better, sous vide or barbecue? And it's like together. It's like they're not fighting each other. They're not, you know, at war with each other. They're two different methods that if you combine them, you can make something totally different and totally new. So
I've had this going to barbecue events here in Australia, and I didn't mention that, guys. I live in Brisbane, or Brisbane, as a lot of people want to say, but it's
Brisbane.
It's Brisbane. Just quick, short, tight. Don't stretch it. We don't have that drawl anymore. You know, we're not from the deep south or out in the what we call cocky country out in the middle of Australia. But yeah, I'm on the east coast, and it's a subtropical climate here now. Like, well, I'm in the middle of winter, and I tend to wear shorts and t-shirts during the day. You know, it's terrible. It really is. It's like San Diego in California. It's that sort of climate. So, my problem for me doing, you know, it's very hard for me to say smoked cheese in the barbecue because it gets too hot too quick. This is the time of year when I can do that. I love using those cold mornings to do bacon. I mean, that's something that I've done. I'll do cured bacon and then smoke it, but I'll layer it with other flavors. And I've got a couple of other things to show you too. Some smoked garlic that I turned into a paste, and then I pasteurized in the sous vide. Now, that's something else. So I like to mix this stuff up, and I'm like you, Darren. I love using all these different cooking methods. None's better than any other. And I mean, I get annoyed with people in these barbecue events when you walk up and you start talking to them, and then they go, "Oh, what have you got?" And you tell them, and "Oh, you've got a pellet grill. Oh, you know, you know, you don't use a real barbecue." I go, "Mate, I've got a charcoal grill as well. Like, get off your high horse. I've also got a gas barbecue. So what?
Yeah.
They're tools. They're not an altar that you're praying to or worshipping at, although some people it is."
Right.
And the same with sous vide. You know, when you mention sous vide, a couple of guys I know in the industry over here in the barbecue sector, they berate sous vide cooking like you don't want to know. And I go, "Have you ever tried it?"
Yeah, they don't understand it. They don't
understand.
They don't understand what it is, and they don't understand its precise cooking and exactly what it can do. And that's why when I talk to, like, I've had barbecue guys on my show, on my podcast that you know, aren't really familiar with it. And, you know, most of the ones I have are pretty open-minded because they're adventurous cooks anyway. They're not, you know, these guys that are just focused on, I gotta, you know, do it this way. when I explain that to them, what I just said to you is that I can make something totally different by combining the two. It opens their eyes up, and they go. Even Steven Reichland, which I'm sure you guys even know about him down there. He was a really famous, cooks on fire all the time, just smoke. And he even said when he came on my show, he said, I'm not a big proponent of the sous vide. I'm fought live fire, and I'm like, I understand that, Steven. And I told him what I just told you, and he was like, you might have changed my mind about sous vide, because I could see a light bulb going off on his head. And it's like, I don't understand why people want to pit cooking methods against each other, because they really shouldn't. They're they're different tools, like you said. Even just a pellet grill versus a charcoal grill, or a stick burner, or a smoke gun. They're all just different tools, and you can do different things with them. So
correct, and that's what I love to do. And then what I'm bringing to the conference is these concentrated aromatics, that when you add that as another layer of flavor enhancement to sous vide and barbecue or whatever else you want to use it with, it takes it to the next level. Let's move on with some slides. There are a few other things to show you. So this is a typical prep for me, where I've got some meatloaf that I've been putting in, and we're going to talk about meatloaf in a minute, because I know it's probably the most basic, cheapest meal that you can make for a family. But using sous vide and or barbecue, you turn the cheapest piece of meat in the butcher's cabinet into something that is absolutely divine delicious. Some pork, some kangaroo there, and you'll notice that there's some butter in there. I sometimes use cultured butter or ghee. I do a lot of comfy cooking, or like cooking in fats, because I find it enhances the flavor. It also is a good vehicle for carrying those aromatics into the cook. So let's talk about sous vide meatloaf. This was something that I got into once I got the chamber back, because I was able to pull a really tight vacuum on the meat. And I don't like loading up food with unnecessary things, unnecessary fillers. I like it simple, the KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid. Or keep it simple, students, as I would say to some of my classes. And this is literally a container of meat from the supermarket cabinet. Tear the packaging off, sprinkle on the herbs and salt and pepper, turn it, do the second side, slide it into the sous vide bag, pull a vacuum on it, and then that's what you end up with. And then chuck it in the sous vide, or place it gently and lovingly in the sous vide, whichever way you wish to do. And I tend to cook a lot of my proteins around 57 degrees Celsius or 135. I like it. I found that 60 degrees was a little bit too overdone for medium. I like it a little bit under that. And 3 to 6 hours, it's done. It's easy to eat. But if you're looking at longer storage, I'll cook out to 12 plus hours. And I know, without having to go to Douglas Baldwin's book and look up the pasteurization tables and all that muck, that stuff is dead, that there's nothing left alive in it, that I've killed everything in it.
Right.
And a lot of the time too, I will layer in aromatics into that are also antimicrobial. So I've got some rosemary extract that is, it's a high-end polyphenolic extract. It's the non-aromatics of rosemary, and it's this greeny, mucky looking liquid, but it's extremely antimicrobial and antioxidant. So it stops stops meat going rancid, but it also kills the bugs that make it go rancid, and also causes botulism and all those other, like salmonella, etc. So when I can do sous vide, and I can leave it sit in the fridge for 5-6 weeks sometimes before I'll cook it. I don't generally take it out that long. I'll usually go 3 to 4 weeks, but I've pushed stuff and seen what it's like, and it's still fine. I've even done microbe testing where I've taken a bag of meat, taken it into because I used to work in the biotech industry, and I've taken it into a microbe lab and said, here, open the bag, take some swabs, grow them up, and there's nothing in it. So,
right.
I wouldn't recommend everybody do that, but if you know what you're doing, you can really push the shelf life under refrigeration of sous vide. So, and then the next thing I like to do, if I can be bothered, is glaze it and throw it in the barbecue and in the pellet smoker and get a nice glazed surface on, as you can see here. And otherwise, I'll just take it out and pan fry it, sear it, maybe throw some gravy over it. And as you can see by these pictures, the meat, because you put the salt in, the salt activates all the protein strands and they become sticky. And then under the vacuum, you're pushing it together under such vacuum, under such pressure, that it all reforms. You don't need to use meat glue like glutamates in there to make it stick. Yeah, you don't need to use that. So you can't get any more pure than this. This is basically your protein, your salt, your pepper, and your spices. And if you want to put a glazed sauce over or some liquid smoke, or I sometimes put truffle extract in, which is kind of yummy, or some other alcoholic beverages of various types to give some flavour to it. Port wine's a nice one. Like, it'll really give a nice deep flavour to it. I've cooked them in mulberry sauce. Like, I've got a mulberry tree at the back, so I made some beautiful mulberry sauce, and I put that in the sous vide. That's really nice with duck breast sous vide in that, and then finish with that as a glaze is fantastic.
One thing I want to touch on too is because you kind of brought it up with how the salt, penetrates deeper when you're using the sous vide, and that's one of the things I learned online from AmazingRibs.com with Dr. Blonder. Did a couple of studies and showed that low temperature cooking speeds the brining process. So I don't have to brine my steaks anymore before I put them in a sous vide bag. If I'm putting salt in the bag with them, and people will tell me that, well, did you brine it before you put it in the sous vide bag? It's like, no, I just put the salt on, put it in the bag, because I don't have to anymore, because the sous vide, the low temperature cooking, actually speeds the brining process up, and it brines it just fine. It's like, the equivalent of having it brine in a refrigerator overnight, in that 4 hours.
Yeah. So. Well, also too, it's actually the vacuum in the bag too, because the vacuum, when you pull the sort of vacuums we're running, it opens the fibers up and allows those solutions to move in, penetrate more deeply as well. So there's that aspect as well as the heat of it. Pretty much these days I dry brine. If I want a pretty piece of salmon to put on the barbecue, I'll sous vide it. I'll dry brine it first. If I don't care that it's got a bit of white albumin on the outside and doesn't look so pretty, I don't bother. If I'm doing a show cook, then yes, I will either wet brine it or dry brine it and then sous vide it, or put it on the grill and smoke it, depending on what I'm doing. Same with me. I don't tend to do a lot of brining. Pork, like really, really big cuts of pork, I might wet brine sometimes. Just depends. Bacon, as I said, I dry brine that I'll vacuum pack that. That's my secret to doing bacon. There's a really good book, which I'll give you the link to later. We'll put a pic of it up, where they talk about the different methods of doing all sorts of different deliciousness in pork. And I came across the recipe in that, which was a weight recipe. So you do everything by weight, and you never get the salt wrong. You never get the sodium nitrate wrong, and the
equilibrium. I think
you got to get those things right. Otherwise, it goes like hardtack. And basically, I put it in a vacuum bag and I massage it, and I put it in the fridge for a week. And every day I'll turn it and give it a bit of a rub. And you just watch it slowly pull the moisture out, and it brines beautifully. And then you just take it out, rinse it off, dry it, put it back on the rack in the fridge to let it sit for an hour or two in the refrigerator, where it'll dry the surface. You get that nice patina, that nice stickiness on it, which will then take up the smoke. I stick it in the pellet smoker with the pellet tube. So I cold smoke for a couple of hours with my bacon, and then I hot smoke it, bring it up to about 60 degrees, I think it is. So I get it to medium cook in the smoker, and because I like to do that, because the bacon, you can slice it like ham then and eat it if you want to, but when you do and you slice nice thick cuts of it and you're pan frying it, you put it in, she starts to cook, and then all of a sudden you get this fat let down, and that's done. Turn it. It drops a bit more fat. It's done. Take it out and then cook your eggs in that bacon fat. And mate, it is the most delicious tender bacon. I took some. I've got a couple of different butchers that I do some work with and I collaborate with. And I took some of that bacon that I said, and it was literally just salt, sodium nitrite, nitrite, and pepper. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, and then smoke in the barbecue. And I took some of that bacon into them, and they said, "This is some of the best bacon we've ever eaten." Now, I mean, that's a pretty nice, gold star for what. And it's a very simple process. It's a very minimalist process. So I love making bacon. It's easy, and that's big using the sous vide, basically using the vacuum packing, and then in the pellet smoker. So it's that combination of techniques and science that really does make a difference.
And it's a lot cheaper than buying that kind of bacon in the store. So
yeah, look, yeah, I'm sometimes shocked at the price on the price of meat in America compared to Australia. We have beautiful meat. We have some of the best meat in the world, and it's very clean. It's very green, but it's expensive compared to what you buy over there. And I remember being in Costco in Atlanta, and I came across some lamb loin chops in Costco. They were about that thick, and there was a tray of them, and I thought, these are cheaper than I can buy them in Australia.
And they're Australian.
And they're Australian. I'm thinking, what the hell's going on with this?
Yeah.
Aside from doing meatloaf, I also like doing meatballs this way. And so I did some cheesy meatballs with some herbs, vacuum packed, thrown in the sous vide and cooked. And then I'll either leave them in, put them in the freezer, and then when I want them, pull them out and use them again, or keep them in the fridge for a week or two. It makes doing spaghetti and meatballs or veggies and meatballs a really quick and easy dish because the meat's pre-cooked. You can chuck it in and sear it if you want to, but I usually just throw it in the sauce and finish it off. And I find that works super well. We were talking about kangaroo. You wanted to talk about kangaroo. So
yeah, because, it's really an exotic meat here, but you have a lot more access to it. And I wanted to know too, is it a big staple in your diet over there, or is it an exotic meat for you guys?
It really, look, there's a couple of companies that have done a very good job of managing the wild harvested meat, because we don't herd kangaroos. They do that themselves. Right. So it's all wild harvested, mostly in South Australia. And kangaroos can be a bit of a pest species. Even though they're on our coat of arms, we eat them. It'd be like you guys eating a bald eagle, but we eat the kangaroo and the emu. I'm not so keen on emu. It's a little bit gamey, but roo, I love kangaroo. Think of tender, delicious venison, and when you get a good roo meat, like what I'm showing you here, this is pretty good roo meat. I'll generally go with the fillet or the steaks. I'll sometimes use the roo mince. It's a very lean meat. But yeah, so there's a couple of companies that do it. Most of our kangaroos, though, that are harvested or culled end up in pet food. And that to me is a bit of a travesty. It's a really delicious meat, and it's a bit underutilized because, again, most people don't know how to cook it. Whether that's in America or here in Australia, they really don't. And I found, as I said, back in 2012, I did this experiment where I got a whole lot of roo steak, and I basically sliced it up, prepped it, a little bit of salt and pepper, and chucked it in the sous vide at different temperatures. I micro-packed it in little bags. I did a couple of pieces each. And then at the time, my neighbour was a commercial chef, and I had him coming for a blind tasting, where I basically diced it all up, numbered it on a plate, and randomly arranged it in different temperatures. And we worked out that 57 degrees C, or 135, I think it is, 134, was the right point for a medium rare piece of kangaroo. It stays succulent, it doesn't get too chewy, and it doesn't get too dry. Being a super lean, hemoglobin rich meat, it's very dark, but it's very lean. There's virtually no fat. What fat there is omega-3 fatty acids. So it's actually very healthy for you as a protein source. And it's rich in iron as well. So yeah, I like it. A lot of people in Australia are a bit funny about eating kangaroo, but I don't have a problem with it. Here's some roo steaks. As in prep, my standard prep is basically dry them off, get any blood off them, put a bit of salt and pepper on, so that the top slide is just with some Italian herbs. And then I put some, I think it was liquid smoke, or might have been truffle extract on the bottom one. Out of the sous vide bag is the final shot on the right side there. And then, cooked off in a hot seared in a pan with a bit of ghee. And it's finished, and served.
Now that one on the left looks like it could be any kind of sirloin or fillet here.
I've served it.
Yeah.
I've actually served it to people here and said, "Here's dinner." I had someone over for dinner, and I served them this and didn't tell them what it was. And I said, "So how'd you like the steak?" And they said, "It was absolutely delicious. I've never eaten anything so lovely." And I said, "It was kangaroo." And they went, "What?" And I went, "Yeah, it was roost steak." I said, "Don't worry about it. There's plenty more. They're not endangered. They're not an endangered species." But the thing with it, the same as with a lot of your game meats in America, like buffalo and moose and caribou and
Elk,
venison, elk and all those, they must be treated with respect. Sous vide is the perfect method of cooking them, and then hot pan sear, quick sear, or torch. I'll use my Iwatani torch to torch the outside. It works really well for things like steak and roux. And then you've got to rest it before you carve it. You've got to give it those few minutes just to let the juices just equalize. Otherwise, if you just sear it, pull it out and cut it, it'll just bleed everywhere. It'll be a bit of a mess.
So what other kind of cute, fuzzy animals do you eat there? Do you eat koala bears and?
No.
I'm just kidding.
That would be heresy. I mean, look, unfortunately, with the bushfires we had last year and earlier this year, which were horrific, we lost a lot of koalas. They were killed in the fires, as were a lot of other native animals, unfortunately. Other things that people will eat are things like crocodile. Tastes like chicken. I'm not that keen on it.
Gator, we eat gator here in Florida all the time. So
yeah. Oh, look, and I've seen that with the gators on a barbecue, and I thought, yeah, I'd eat that. I'm fairly experimental.
Mostly the tail, because that's just a big muscle. So that's what they fry it up like they fry up chicken, and it really does taste kind of like chicken. So
yeah, well, ancestrally the same thing. It's reptilian in ancestry.
Yeah.
Look, I've eaten. We're starting to see a lot more goat coming into the market. I've had camel, also harvested. We've got wild herds of camel in the outback. We've got massive amounts of problems with feral goats, and so there's quite a lot of farm goat now as well. And I don't mind that as a trade-off for lamb sometimes. What else? Oh yeah, venison. Yeah, I like venison when I can get it. I've gone to New Zealand. I've actually brought venison back with me that's been cryovacked, and I'll sous vide it. It's all legal to bring back. So.
How about Tasmanian devil? Have you eaten?
No, we don't. Look, no.
Wallaby.
No,
what about wallaby?
No. Well, wallaby's a small version of roux. So yeah, look, same. Yeah. Not really into eating our birds either. Well, we've got these amazing birds. We've got around where I live here in Tarragindi in Brisbane. There's a big we've got a forest near me, and I get the scrub turkeys come in. Well, I wouldn't eat one of those either. They're a bit like you put a rock in a pot with the turkey and holding it, a bit like what they say cooking crow. Yeah. You put the rock in and you cook it until the rock's tender, and you eat the rock and throw the thing away. Well,
it's like vulture or something. Yeah.
Well, yeah, a bit like that. Bit of roadkill. Rabbit, I've done rabbit too. We not here in Queensland because they're illegal, but to have rabbits up here because they kind of ran over the country back in the early parts of the 19th century. No, look, I eat a lot of roux. I eat a lot of pork, beef, chicken, turkey, duck. Oh, I love duck. We get really good duck here as well. So it's not that different to what you have. Our cuts for beef are different. Some of our cuts have got different names, but other than that, it's not that sort of frontier country.
No,
so
I know kangaroos about the more exotic. That's what I'm saying. You're not going to eat koala bear and stuff like that. I was just kidding.
Oh no, we don't. No, we don't do that. As I said, it'd be like you eating your bald eagle, which
right.
Or our wedge-tail eagle, which is like 3 times the size and can carry off a lamb. So we have them bigger and better and more dangerous here. But So one of the things I wanted to talk about was sous vide sauces. Some of the things that I do where I've made a few different sauces. And what I like to do is, as you've probably worked out, I like to take the path of least resistance, keep it simple. So I'll take a standard off-the-shelf sauce and I'll tweak it. In this particular slide, I've got one of Grill Master's Vintage Smokehouse sauce. And I'll add some coconut amides to it, which are a bit like teriyaki sauce, a bit like soy. And also some of that balsamic vinegar. I'm really blessed here that I've got cultured butter I can get at the market from a unique dairy herd up in Gympie, and I've got another guy that does. He traveled to England to do a scholarship on how to make vinegars. Strange as that may seem, but he makes some of the most incredibly flavorful and different vinegars, and so I like to incorporate his material into my cooking. And so my standard glaze sauce is a mixture of these things, and I'll vary the balsamic vinegar a bit, and I might throw in some Worcestershire or other things in there as well. But I don't like super sweet. That's one of the things I know about American barbecue is it seems to be very over the top on spices, on salt and sugar, and lots of sugar.
Yeah, it depends on where you go. That's another thing with American barbecue. There's regional.
Every state's something different.
Everything's different. I mean, Texas barbecue, they really don't have sauces. I mean, they only really started offering sauces because people would come from North Carolina and expect some kind of sauce. But if you go to Texas, the sauce is on the table and hardly anybody uses it because you really don't need it. You go to South Carolina, they use a lot of mustard, and then you go into Eastern North Carolina and it's vinegar based with, it's more spicy. And then Kansas City and Memphis is that, really high sugar, very sweet sauce. So I like a little bit of everything. I like adventurous stuff. So
yeah, well, I'm the same, and I'll try barbecue anyway. I mean, that's I'm ketogenic in my food choices. I don't eat a lot of carbs, so I eat a lot more meat and good fats, and it helps me with being the trim, taut, and terrific guy I am. Never trust a skinny chef. Well, I'm getting there. I'm trimming down, but I like to eat stuff that's not too heavy in spices, and I like it balanced, and because and so that's why I started tweaking these sauces. And then another one that I made was this spicy lime and ginger barbecue sauce. And so I basically took a recipe where I, little bit of brown sugar, some apple cider vinegar, tomatoes, Worcestershire, mustard, some different powders, and then I tweaked it. It had lime juice in it, and then I tweaked it with lime and ginger extract. So I'll be talking a bit more about this in the Sous Vide Summit. So I'm using 5-fold lime in this, which is a concentrated lime extract of the oil, and a ginger CO2 extract. So it's got all of the heat and all of the flavor profile of ginger. And I have to say that everyone who's tried this barbecue sauce goes, oh my, like it is flavorful. It goes on Chinese barbecue. It goes on, I use it as a glazing sauce on a lot of my stuff, either in the oven or I'll put it over sausages or over meat. It goes well on duck. It goes well on turkey and other fowl as well. So that's one of the things I like to do is I like to layer those flavors and come up with something different. Rump Cap or Picanha, as one of our sous vide cohorts likes to do a lot of Picanha. I was lucky that I, again, was working with a local butcher who wanted me to do a whole lot of this stuff. So I ended up with, I think, 6 or 8 rump caps to cook at once. So I sous vide the whole lot, and then I did them in differing ways. I put them in the smoker and pellet smoker, and these are some of the results of those glazed meats, and they came up absolutely delicious. It is it's a very undervalued piece of meat, rump cap or picanha, as you call it over there. This is some of the Angus Reserve, which is a grass-fed and then grain-finished meat. They've been winning awards all across America, apparently, the Angus Reserve team, with their barbecue, with this particular meat, because it is so top shelf. It's like butter. It's good. It's not Wagyu style, but it's almost there. The marbling in it is as you can see from some of these pics, the marbling is quite nice, and it's different to Wagyu, different to your Wagyu, but it's getting there. It's a really full flavored, tender piece of meat. And again, Wagyu Topside and buffalo brisket, some of the ones I did, and as I paraphrased our sous vide friend, they don't look good right now, but you just wait to see. And that's the thing. Straight out of a sous vide, meat doesn't look so great. It looks grey, it looks green, it looks all sorts of weird ass colours. But the minute you glaze it or sear it or finish it off, and then it takes on a different life of its own. So now I love to do this. I love to do sous vide meat, and then this is just an example. Buffalo brisket. If you haven't tried buffalo brisket, give it a go. It's actually really interesting. This one was a Northern Territory buffalo, so it's the water buffalo, not the bison. Mm-hmm. I'd love to get my hands on some bison. I had some bison steak in where was I? Denver. I was there for a class, and I got a bison steak from a guy, and that was pretty delicious. Other things with barbecue, Wagyu Topside. I was super interested. My local supermarket had this in for like $18 a kilo, and I looked at it, I went, what? And it was a grade 5 Wagyu. Because it wasn't your normal steak, it was a big lump of meat. They couldn't sell it, so I bought lots of it. And
we call that top round over here. So it's kind of London broil. It's more usually a tougher type meat. So, but
sous vide, 10 hours.
Wagyu is going to be a lot better, that's for sure, because it's going to be well marbled. So
you can see in the right side, the pictures on the right side, just how deliciously tender and moist it was. Straight out of the barbie, finished. But then the next day, cold, like as a cold cut, where you slice it off in the thinnest slices, and it's buttery. And I served that with, I think it was a earlier that I'd made, and as a cold meat, the flavour of the fats come out, and tender. Just look, it's a terrible life I live, my friend. You know, the food I have to suffer through, and hence why I started sharing it on Instagram under Aroma Science Guy, because I wanted to share my suffering with the rest of you. And I remember when I started sharing stuff in your group, some of the comments you made on some of the things I was putting up. And brisket, you know, when I don't feel like firing up firing up the barbecue, and like when it's raining or whatever, I've done a variation on the Chef Steps indoor brisket recipe where I'll sous vide for 36 hours, 144, and I've made up basically my variation on their glaze. I didn't particularly like it; had too much sugar in it, so I've tweaked it back, and then chucked in the oven, you know, and finished in a low oven, and then taking those juices and reducing them and making gravies. And that's something else I love to do with bag juices. That's a whole other art of making delicious gravies and sauces from bag juices that a lot of people sort of just chuck it away. Particularly if I'm doing stews or casseroles, I will sous vide my meat. I always sous vide my meat for casseroles now. And then I'll either drop it cold straight out of the fridge in the bag, or out of the sous vide in with the vegetables. And I always put the bag juices in, because there's all of your liquid gelatin, there's all of your other flavors, some of the fats as well. And you know,
I do that with pulled pork when I'm doing pulled pork, and I sous vide. I save the juices out of the bag, and when it's done smoking and I'm pulling it and getting it ready, I'll dump it right back in there. So, but so they can find you here, the Aroma Science Guy, and if you just plug that in on Facebook, Instagram, that'll get you to Mark Webb, LinkedIn, and I'm really excited to hear what you have ready for the Sous Vide Summit as well, because I think that's going to be something fun, something different that nobody else is going to be able to bring to the summit, and it's something different, that's for sure. So like I said, I know what I'm going to bring, and it's going to be, you know, how to combine the two, but you're bringing in something totally different, how to look at it a little bit different. Yeah, sous
A
vide
lot
does a
more we
lot
can
of
do there.
things. Yeah, there's a sous vide does a lot of things, and that's one of the things I really like to bring to people's attention. That everybody who is first exposed to it, they just think it cooks a good steak or it'll cook a good chicken breast, and
Mhm.
that's it. And people like you and me are the ones that are out there showing people you can do a lot more with it, and especially when you start bringing in these other factors and other cooking methods and other other processes, it's just going to make it even better. But I look forward to hearing your Sous Vide Summit presentation. That's going to be great. And everybody, make sure you check out the Sous Vide Summit. I'm going to put a link to that below so you can watch Mark's presentation and many other great sous vide professionals and what they're going to offer. I'll have a discount code for the tickets. It's going to be online, so you have no excuse. There's no reason you can't participate because you don't have to go anywhere. You can just do it all on your computer. But Mark, thanks again for being on. And is there anything else you wanted to touch base on before you left?
No, I think that's pretty much it, Daz. So yeah, look, thanks for having me, and I will see you at the summit. So,
It was great having you, and check out again the Aroma. What was it again? The Aroma Science Guy. There you go. I was
Aroma
thinking
Science
Sous Vide
Guy.
Summit. The Aroma Science Guy on Instagram, Facebook, and just plug it into the Google and it'll pop up. But thanks again. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you again on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast.
Bye.
Well, thanks again for joining us on the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I want to thank Mr. Mark Webb, the Aroma Science Guy, for being on. Make sure you check out his stuff on Facebook, Instagram. Just look up the Aroma Science Guy. And make sure you follow the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast, Fire and Water Cooking YouTube channel. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram as well. And make sure you check out the Sous Vide Summit coming up August 21st to the 23rd, 2020. I'll see you on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast.